It's safe to say that 2024 was one of the most competitive seasons we've seen. Max Verstappen hasn't held back when discussing the 2024 season, saying that he believes some teams have used illegal advantages to get ahead of the rest of the grid, including his own team. However, 2025 is expected to be an even more competitive campaign. Can Verstappen respond favorably regarding the Drivers' Championship? More importantly, which team is he referring to that could repeat these antics in the upcoming campaign? And even though the Dry Championship was concluded with a few races left, it served as a fantastic foundation for what is expected to happen in 2025. However, Max Verstappen claims that some outlets were not entirely legal and that some background events occurred that will regrettably go unreported and unspoken when discussing it with the public or media. According to the four-time world champion, there were backdrop events that meant we had absolutely no chance in some races, that's for sure. But nobody will ever acknowledge that, of course, whenever the term cheating was used during the 2024 campaign, it was in relation to McLaren and their rear wing, an invention that was prohibited from Baku onward due to its excessive flexing when loaded with high speed. It's interesting that, despite his vocality, Verstappen is still respectful and doesn't reveal any names in his interviews, but that doesn't mean he can conceal his dissatisfaction with the way some teams develop their cars over the mid-season battle. But McLaren fiercely protected the rear wing. Despite claims made by Perez and Lear that their cars lacked tiny DRS to battle the rest of the grid, the engineers had such faith in McLaren's drivers that they did everything within the permitted margin. Even though his car caused the most skepticism in Baku since he was able to defend against the SF24 of Lear for such a lengthy amount of racing time, Piastri defended his squad by claiming that it passed all of the deflection testing. The Austrian team hasn't had the smoothest upgrade packages themselves as they enter the 2024 season with a brand new design that was supposed to be revolutionary and see them differ from the rest of the grid. Red Bull hit the first obstacle in Miami, and ever since Nye announced his departure, the car started to hit its limits and was swiftly caught up by McLaren and then Ferrari. However, the problem with Red Bull may have started long before Baku thanks to that little DRS trick. After what we thought would be yet another dominant season with Ven winning 4 of the first 5 races, McLaren is essentially the only team on the grid to have introduced upgrades throughout the majority of the season without hitting the gas pedal. This made for an interesting battle in the Drivers' Championship, thanks to the leap that the MCL38 made, and even the working Baz squad was taken aback by how competitive they were on tracks like Immer. Red Bull's obstacles, the 4-time world champion elaborated on this by saying that all plans for new parts that were to come after China could go in the bin, and the team essentially started all over again after that. Mercedes and Ferrari have also seen their cars not respond positively to the upgrades being brought to the cars. Verstappen also acknowledged this, saying that he started to see some graphs that he didn't see before and that the car's behavior in these slow-speed corners was just abnormal. I saw some graphs earlier and as we were examining the data, I noticed some aerodynamic changes in the way we turned and went around corners, as well as in terms of ride heights, which were different from the car from the previous year. I thought, hey, it's very clear that this and this is the problem, isn't it? And that was correct. I mentioned at the time that it was obvious that we needed to work on it because the engineers, of course, are fully aware of what has transpired, changed from the previous year's car, and while we were still winning races convincingly at the start of the previous season, I already felt that the car's balance wasn't what I wanted it to. All of these issues were resolved by teams that weren't McLaren, and the interesting thing is that McLaren began their ascent in 2023. So it would be unlawful to criticize them without acknowledging the progress they've made by rebuilding their entire team and hiring key personnel from key teams, like Rob Marshall. When the 2024 season began, McLaren and Mercedes had an intriguing concept of the front wing and its flexibility, which was seen thanks to the cameras that showed how this part of the car acts in slow motion. This is an argument from Red Bull that you might find difficult to defend, but it wasn't just the rear of the MCL38 that caused some concern among the phone world, it was also the front wing. Speedy Corners Red Bull has requested additional FIA approval to see whether or not this is a course of action that they may pursue, and the regulatory body has taken into account. After much research, the conclusion was that nothing is illegal as of yet, but that more tests and restrictions may be implemented for the upcoming season because the FIA engineers did not have enough time or data to determine whether or not that part was illegal. It is somewhat controversial because the rulebook is stationary and doesn't change unless the FIA implements or removes something from it, so reading your own rules, seeing the car, and comparing whether or not it aligns with them does seem like an easy task from the outside. However, based on the FIA's actions, it's all but that. Once more, it came down to Verstappen's competitiveness and his ability to get the most out of the car. even when it was at its lowest, which he acknowledges was Monza. The four-time world champion has never given up, and there were moments when there were serious doubts that he might lose the championship due to Red Bull's serious downfall, which was dubbed the bigger reason compared to McLaren's illegal car that won races with a 20-second advantage. In the high downforce circuits like Singapore and Zaynor, Verstappen himself stated that if the 2025 season began with the current cars, and if changes were not made, there is no way that he would win a championship again on pure merit. He added that if we keep going this way, I won't win a championship the following year. It's that easy. We really need to take action to be competitive the following season. We all know that I have faith that the team can resolve the balance issues from the previous season and some things that we cannot change. I always keep the pressure on myself as well, because at one point, the car was barely steerable. Yes, the FIA may have a lot of work ahead of it because there are a lot of loopholes that were discovered in the 20124 regulations, but the majority of them were fixed. Next year, we know that it must be better over the curbs, bumps, and slow corners, which are typically our weak points. If we are still defeated, it will be on the basis of pure speed. McLaren is without a doubt the team that will have to prove a lot in the upcoming campaign, not only because they have one of the most competitive duos on the grid, but also because of the massive steps that put their car in such a great position that Norris had the opportunity to become a world champion, and he and his team not binning so many points due to mistakes in the strategy, as well as the fact that the governing body said it will deal with them properly from 2025 onwards. With all of this in mind, do you believe that Ven's statement was made specifically for McLaren, or more importantly, do you think that the MCL 38 was actually illegal, or was it just flexing and evading the rules a little bit more but still within the allowed range? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you're interested in Coda's most recent tirade against Red Bull, be sure to watch the video that's showing on your screen at the moment. It's safe to say that 2024 was one of the most competitive seasons we've seen. Max Verstappen hasn't held back when discussing the 2024 season, saying that he believes some teams have used illegal advantages to get ahead of the rest of the grid, including his own team. However, 2025 is expected to be an even more competitive campaign. Can Verstappen respond favorably regarding the Drivers' Championship? More importantly, which team is he referring to that could repeat these antics in the upcoming campaign? And even though the Dry Championship was concluded with a few races left, it served as a fantastic foundation for what is expected to happen in 2025. However, Max Verstappen claims that some outlets were not entirely legal, and that some background events occurred that will regrettably go unreported and unspoken when discussing it with the public or media. According to the four-time world champion, there were backdrop events that meant we had absolutely no chance in some races, that's for sure. But nobody will ever acknowledge that, of course, whenever the term cheating was used during the 2024 campaign, it was in relation to McLaren and their rear wing, an invention that was prohibited from Baku onward due to its excessive flexing when loaded with high speed. It's interesting that, despite his vocality, Verstappen is still respectful and doesn't reveal any names in his interviews, but